Welcome to the Inside Pitch. I'm Christopher Lockhart, the creator and administrator of this private Facebook group where screenwriters, creatives, and filmmakers meet to ask and answer questions and exchange ideas and information on the craft and business of movie making. Excuse me, I've got to turn this down. There we go. I am joined, as always, by the producer of these events, my co-administrator, here, the very adorable Ramesh.
Adorable, what?
and I avoided saying your last name.
I know you did. Hi, everyone.
Oh, my Lord, I'm telling you. Oh, boy. Whatever happened to Johns and Marys? Come on, let's make America great again. Oh, my. Hey, Ramesh, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing very, very well. It's Labor Day weekend, so
yes.
I suspect our live attendance might be a little low, but have no fear because we post these to our
page
YouTube channel on the page and the YouTube channel.
Right.
We do have a YouTube channel, Ramesh.
Yes, we do.
Yes, I've never been, but I hear it's there, and that's where we park all of these interviews. And so you can go back and watch them over and over and over again. So, so just before we bring out our guest, just a little bit of housekeeping. Ramesh reminded me that it is that time of the year that we prepare for our logline contest.
Yes,
that's right. So this would be our third annual logline contest, and we have not yet worked out any of the details, none whatsoever. But sort of the way it worked last year, we started gathering entries. Usually, I think it was around Thanksgiving.
Right. So
start to brush up those log lines, folks. And remember, the top prize gets a $100 gift certificate to Amazon and a story conference with this schmuck. So it'll be fun. Last year, Rich Weems won the contest, and the year before that was Adam Farhi. So we want to add your name to the list. And also, we have our next live interview scheduled for next month. I believe it's the 9th. Is that
October
right?
9th.
October 9th. And we will be meeting with the writers of The Quiet Place.
Yes, Scott Beck and Brian Woods.
Yes. But today we have, I'm going to say the name slowly. Here we go. Alvaro. I was just kidding. I knew how to say it. I was kidding. I was putting the accent on the wrong syllable. You know.
Exactly.
Because you know, by the way, Ramesh, Alvaro and I go way back.
Yes.
Did you know that? We go way back. We met, I believe we met in Seattle. Oh. And we did. And we had a great time because he just has this great wealth of film knowledge.
Yes.
And I was riveted. And we had a fun time talking about a particular movie that I love, a foreign film. And then one day out of the blue, he reaches out and says, hey, that movie's playing at the Arrow in Santa Monica. Let's go. So so we went and had I dragged my son along. It was the first foreign film, probably the last, that my son ever saw, but he cried at the end of it. So
what was it?
Forbidden Games. It was the first.
It's a great movie about the kids.
About the kids. First film to win the foreign film Oscar. And and Alvaro even gave me a postcard of the one sheet of the film. So this is a good guy. He's also a member of our group too.
Yes.
All right, but you know something, you usually do the
intros,
official intros. So let me just, before we do that, because I just, let me just check in and see who's here. Just say hello. Some people are saying hello. Yes, Ramesh is adorable. Let me just remind you that if you want to be identified in the chat here for us, you can just like sign up for StreamYard. It isn't a bad thing. I don't believe that they put you on a mailing list or anything like that, right?
I don't think so.
Ramesh? I mean,
think
do you
so.
get spammed from them and stuff like that?
No,
Okay, yeah.
I
So
haven't.
it's just simply as a way for you to be identified. Otherwise, you just come across as Facebook user. That's all. So hello to everybody, whoever you are, because you're all Facebook users to me. And of course, we want to give a shout out to Steve Enlow, the third stooge, who helps to administrate this group. I'm not really doing a very good job talking today. Hello, Sydney.
We have someone from Poland.
We do?
Yes.
Wow.
Isabella Boralska.
Wow. You know, I went to Poland. I had a friend who lives outside of Warsaw, or lived in this little place called, I forget what it's called, but because it's got some Polish name that I can't pronounce either. Magdalenka, kind of outside Warsaw. So, but yeah, you know, it's a great country, beautiful,
yes.
Beautiful. Yeah. So thank you for being here. And we have Sydney Hoffner from Montrose. So look, so we go from Montrose to Poland. Go figure. All right, I'm gonna be quiet. You do the intro, Ramesh.
Okay. Our guest today is Alvaro Rodriguez, who is the co-creator and executive producer of the Netflix animated series SEIS MANOS. He is also the co-screenwriter of Robert Rodriguez's Machete and Shorts, and the writer and co-producer of Last Rampage, a 2017 film. He was a writer on the TV series From Dusk Till Dawn for El Rey Network and Netflix International, and story editor on Chicago Fire. He is producer on Showtime's drama series American Rust, starring Jeff Daniels, which premieres next Sunday, September 12th. So watch it. He also is producer on the recently announced Florida Man for Netflix, starring Edgar Ramirez. His short fiction has appeared in the Bram Stoker award-winning anthology After Death, among others. A frequent panelist at the Austin Film Festival, he has been a guest speaker for writing courses and screenwriting conferences across the country, from Seattle to New York City. He is currently developing projects with Exile/Endeavor Content, Abbott Hameiri/Fremantle Media, Shout Factory, Open Productions, and others. Alvaro, my friend, welcome.
Thank you.
Hey.
Hello.
Welcome. Good morning. Thank you for rolling out of bed.
Right.
And being here to put yourself on tape. Yes.
Yeah, he and I actually got together last month.
Yes.
Yeah, he was in Pittsburgh shooting American Rust. So.
Oh,
yeah.
Is the show actually filming there, or was this?
Yes, we was shot entirely in and around Pittsburgh and environs, so it's set in Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
we were
the story is set in Western PA. So.
Yeah, you know, I actually read the pilot.
So.
I actually read it. Yeah. I don't recall for who or why. I probably read it for a client to star, I would assume. I don't know for who. I don't remember. But it was good. You know, so. So
well, it's was it recent? I mean, like in the last 2 years, because the project had been around for a while before this iteration came about. It was set up at another network with different people, and then it you know didn't happen, and then it got resurrected when Jeff Daniels got attached and involved. And
which would make sense.
Dan
I'm going to
Futterman.
tell you right now. This is live, folks. Look at this. I'm stopping. I'm just going through some of my notes. Here it is. Yeah, I read it a while ago.
You're gonna check your email?
I'm checking. It looks like I read it in 2016. And I don't know if I should say who I read it for. I don't know if I'm allowed.
I think that was the previous incarnation of the project. So you know, it might be different from what you recall.
Perhaps, but I definitely liked it. I read it for Vince Vaughn.
Wow.
So
interesting.
That's what I'll tell you.
Excellent.
So at any rate, That's some inside information. Yeah.
A
So
terrific actor and the star of, I think, a very underrated season of television, which was True Detective season 2, which a lot of people
yes.
did not like.
That's true.
But I thought that he was terrific in that series.
We
So.
put Rachel McAdams in that. So
She was great too.
I remember reading the first. I think I had to read the first 2 or 3 episodes of it, and I just the hype was so big on it. Obviously coming out of that.
Yeah.
It's like probably even if it were Drek, which some people perhaps thought it was still a coup to find yourself involved in that project, considering how great the first one was. So let's kind of start at the present, and then we'll kind of work our way back, because I don't ever try to make any sense out of any of this. We just talk. It's just a conversation.
This will be a current timeline with occasional flashbacks.
Yeah, exactly right.
Exactly.
So let's because I'm sure that a lot of people here want to talk about Machete, because he don't text, and everybody wants to hear about that. But let's talk about American Rust. Let's talk about the present. How did you get involved in the project? What does it mean to be a writer producer on a show like this? What are your responsibilities? Sort of just give us the whole picture.
Well, American Rust. I read the book, and actually I had bought the book and listened to the Audible version of the book like when it came out 8 years ago, whenever that was. And I really liked the book at that time. And then it was a couple of years ago, I got a call from my manager asking me if I would be interested in, being interviewed for the show. And I said, yes, absolutely. And so within a few days, I had, gotten an interview. But I was in Texas at the time, actually, and I got a call saying, can you do a FaceTime tomorrow? I'm like, okay. But it had been 7-8 years since I'd read the book. So I had started rereading the book. I'd read about 30 pages of it at that point, and then I just read the whole thing overnight. So it was very fresh in my mind. And I was just really drawn to the story, the characters, the milieu. It's Western Pennsylvania, a place that I had spent very little time in, but there was something about the whole thing that felt very authentic. And Philip Meyer, also the writer of the original novel, had been I believe he went through the James Michener writing program at the University of Texas. I had also been at the University of Texas, not in the Michener program, but I knew other people in the program and all of this stuff. Anyway, it felt like Kismet. I had written a pilot script called White Boy that the showrunners of American Rust had read and responded to. Dan Futterman, who had just come off doing The Looming Tower with Jeff Daniels at Hulu, and also Adam Rapp, who was also with on that project as well. Adam Rapp is an award-winning playwright, just two of the best people I've ever worked with and hope to continue working with. And so I had a FaceTime interview with those guys, and just like, I think because the stuff was so fresh in my mind, it felt like I was really well versed in the material, and they just, we just had a great interview. And afterwards it was, I was like, it's going to be a while before I hear anything. And it was almost immediate. I got a call back saying they want you, and, can you move to Brooklyn?
Wow.
So, but to talk about, the show, like I said, I think it had been set up at one point at another network, cable network, a few years ago, and then with different people attached, and for whatever reason, it didn't go forward. And then I think Jeff Daniels got involved with the project, and that sort of resurrected it. And because he had, had such a great experience working with Danny Futterman and Adam on Looming Tower, he said, I'll do this if you get Dan Futterman to show run the show and create the show. And so they did, and they got a series order at Showtime. And we were about to start production in March of 2020 when everything shut down. We were 3 days away, I believe, from actually, starting to shoot the show in Pittsburgh. And so it was a year before, a year of waiting and wondering, and then, preparing, re-preparing to go into production this March. And so we shot from March through first week of August of this year in and around Pittsburgh. And now the fruits of our labor can be seen on Showtime starting on September 12th.
Yay!
Yeah.
So, as a writer-producer, do you concern yourself with budget, or are those things that other producers are doing, line producers?
It's definitely something that other producers are doing. I think that, so, as you know, and some of the people listening might know, in television, there's different sort of titles for writers on a show. You start at maybe at a staff writer level, and then you move up to story editor, and then executive story editor, and then, co-producer, and then producer, and then supervising producer, and then, co-executive producer, and on all the way up to the top. So I'm a producer, and I'm also a writer on the show, but my title is producer. So, I guess in terms of being, I'm not so much into the, I don't know what I would call it, the business or the financial aspects of it and the logistics of it. I try to think of that in terms of a practical sense as I'm writing, as I'm, as the things that I want to have happen in the story. And it's like, is this absolutely necessary? Is this going to be a huge expense? Can this really be justified by what the needs of the story and stuff like that? But that's almost on a, sort of personal or holistic level or whatever you want to call it. But, I think very much involved in, crafting the story and developing the characters and the storylines that, that happen whenever you're adapting something from existing material like this is. There's always this whole process, which was our, writing room process for that first season of saying, the book is the book is the book. The book will always be the book. What is the show? What's the frame of the show? And that's, a situation that any writer who adapts stuff, finds themselves in when they're trying to turn a novel, for example, into a television series, or adapt a feature film into a television series. And so, that's one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about the process was, building that world, with this really able group of writers that we all, kind of work together to find the stories within the framework of the show and dig deeper into the characters, so we could, give you multiple episodes and multiple seasons of this story.
So how many episodes are in the first season?
There are 9 episodes in season 1.
9. And you have shot them all now?
We are completely shot out. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
wow. And how long did that take?
Well, we were shooting, like I said, from I think mid to late March, all the way up through the first week of August was the last shooting day. I was on set all of June and July to sort of put out fires on set and supervise, as the showrunners were deep into post-production, because we were going to premiere in a few months. And so I went over there to sort of handle things as much as I could, and working with incredible cast and crew and directors that made it very, very easy to do that.
And how did shooting with COVID factor in?
Well, I mean, I think there's always, complications from that, but it was an incredibly well-organized system of, we were tested multiple times a week. We were, it was masked. You were masked all the time. Towards the very end of the shoot, like the last 2 weeks or so, they changed protocol to allow you to be maskless when we were doing exterior shooting and still maintaining, social distance and all of that stuff, if you were vaccinated and stuff like that, or had been tested. So, it had its, I guess I don't even want to say limitations. It was just another sort of part of the protocol that, kind of got used to pretty quickly. And the weird thing about it is that once we did have the maskless thing, it almost felt like I feel naked. I feel like there's like I gotten used to a certain amount of, of comfort with that whole thing. So it was, but it was, everyone I think had a lot of patience with that process, which was really good, because it can be something that can be really irritable. And when there's so many sort of things at play, the last thing you need is some other thing that's going to make things more uncomfortable. But people really, kind of adapted to it really, really well. And like I said, we had great protocol and great, it was a really, really good setup for all of that stuff.
Great. That's good to hear. So how much writing is actually done, or I should say rewriting is actually done on set?
In this case, very little. It was the only things that were sort of like really needed to be addressed were stuff where, you get to the location and you realize that the way it's written cannot play the way it's actually written. I mean, we were very diligent about trying to, let's do things as written. Let's try to get them as close to the script intention as possible. But there were times when, just like the most simple things, like, the character goes through a side door. There is no side door. So how do we do this? How do we set this up? We had a courtroom scene, where it seemed like there would be multiple entrances into this courtroom. There's the entrance that goes into the judge's chambers. There's the entrance that comes in from the hallway. And some of these things just didn't exist in the actual location. And so having to having to adapt to those kinds of things. And then I think it was just like small things of like paring things down in a certain way so that, we were getting to the meat of things a little bit more quickly. When we were actually on set and realizing, some of this stuff was kind of extraneous, or, we had to kind of get to those things. But there was I can't think of any serious rewriting that was happening on set. There were always tweaks, but there was nothing like, oh, this is going to have to completely change now. It just didn't really happen.
Can you talk a little bit about the writer's room, is sort of, because everybody always hears about the writer's room. So,
yeah,
what is that all about? How do writers function in there? How do you interact with the showrunner? Sort of all of the above.
Sure. I mean, I think, there's always this sort of common wisdom or the oft repeated things like, when you're coming into a writer's room for the first time, you're sort of finding your place. And that is true. You spend a certain amount of time just sort of like figuring out, all right, what role am I meant to play here? I know the role that I want to play. I know the role that I think I'm good at playing, but what am I needed for here? There's always, to me at least, this sensibility of going in there and, and trying to realize whatever the showrunner's intention was in bringing me into that space. Am I going to be the person who, comes in with story ideas? Am I going to be the person who comes in with saying like, well, in a courthouse or in a court case, this is the procedure in a criminal case, and this is how this would be done, and this is the process of all of that stuff, or whatever, and I think that the really great thing about our room was that it was a really good mix of people from different backgrounds and really interesting approaches to story. You know, we had one writer, Celine, who's amazing, who, you know, had written on several seasons of like Law and Order SVU. And so she had a really great understanding of like all the procedural kinds of things, you know. We had another writer, Charlie Simpson, who's an amazing playwright. And, you know, so she had a really good sense of like, I don't know, there's something about playwrights that just have a completely different understanding of like, of the closeness of characters in a scene and building a scene, you know, in a way that is very different, I think, from the way other people approach it. Adam is the same way. Adam is, you know, on a next level of understanding, you know, human characters and getting to things that are below the surface and all of that stuff. And then Dan Futterman, you know, came from the acting world, and I think he has a completely different understanding of things. And then Jaquin Castellanos, another writer, you know, also comes from a really interesting, diverse background. And even though our, you know, the sort of face of the show is Jeff Daniels and Maura Tierney, there are a lot of other layers of sort of diverse characters in terms of ethnicity, in terms of sexuality in the story that, you know, a lot of us, you know, brought something to that too. So the whole idea of, you know, that chemistry that happens when you bring in all these different sort of elements and you're trying to find that magic that comes from that. I mean, I felt like that really happened because we all sort of complemented each other, you know, complemented with an E and not an I. In that, you know, it's like you complete me, you had me at hello, all of those kinds of things, you know, where, and it wasn't a lot of glad handing, you know. It wasn't like, oh my God, that's a great idea, let's do that, I love it, you know. It was like, let's do that, but let's kick it in the tires, let's kind of tear it apart and we can rebuild it together kind of thing, you know, which I think is always a good place to come from. And so, you know, working with that caliber of writers is always a, you know, a tremendous experience. Um, so I can't say enough good things about the writing room process. To me, it was always just like a series of, what if we did this? You know, oh my God, that's nuts. Let's do that. You know, and so, and I think there's always this thing that I feel like I learned in the first writers' room I was in, and I keep relearning it every time. Is that of trust of, you know, this is from the first showrunner I worked with, Carlos Cotto, who I think is now on Fox on 911, that on Dusk Till Dawn, that, you know, trusting the process, and that's a great concept or great idea. Let's see if we can earn it. Let's see if we can get the characters there in an organic way, which isn't forced, and we're not just pushing, you know, pieces around the chessboard, but that there's intention and that there's a logic and there's a reasoning behind everything, and characters are coming to these places of decision and epiphany, you know, kind of their own volition, and we're just sort of, you know, guiding them there.
So it sounds a little like you're all learning from each other.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the best part of it, is that you know, I don't feel like there's just something about it where you recognize each other's strengths, you know, and potentially, you know, weaknesses or things where, you know, it's like the things that you can work on, but that's part of that process. It really is, you know, this is the most collaborative art form there is, I think, you know, working in a writer's room. It's like ego has to kind of go by the wayside to a certain degree. And it doesn't mean that if you have strong convictions about any particular thing, whether it be a character or story arc or, you know, dialogue or whatever, that you don't kind of like stand up for those things. But at the same time, you have to be open to listening to things and sort of being just being in that position of learning, of finding out things that you wouldn't have done you wouldn't have had those experiences had you put up walls, had you been, you know, doing this in a vacuum or whatever else and stuff like that. I think it only really makes it better because, and it's something different, I think, from like creating by committee. This isn't really that. This is something that's much more organic and much more, I don't know how to explain it. It's a really engaging and rewarding process that you know, it's one of the most exciting things that, you know, that I really enjoy about the whole process of being a writer. And then being a production is a whole separate kind of, you know.
Yeah, because all of a sudden production teaches you things that you just couldn't possibly know and impacts your writing in many ways.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the, you know, I was so inspired being on the set for 2 months in Pittsburgh. You know, I started writing and doing all this stuff and working on things, and there's just something that comes from the actual physical manifestation of this thing, that these were just the voices in your head that you were just, you know, writing down months ago, and now you're seeing these characters come to life through the actors, you know, through what they bring to the thing. And there's something that's incredibly powerful from that experience, and you realize, God, this, you know, you can do more with a look than you could do with 10 pages of dialogue, you know. And that's a huge lesson for a writer, you know. And I think that the other lesson is that, you know, audiences are smart. You don't want to have your audience way ahead of your characters, because then they'll get bored, you know. And you're always trying to strike that balance between information and character, plot and character. And if it's, you know, if it's too much plot, it feels like an information dump, it feels expository, and you get lost. If it's too much character, you feel like, when is this thing ever going to get moving? And you've got to find that right balance between those two things. And just being on set and watching the thing, you know, evolve, or seeing, you know, because you've got to shoot that same scene from this angle, from that angle, over the shoulder, the two, you know, all these sort of things, and you're hearing it over and over and over again, and the actors are doing it over and over again, and you're realizing, you know, some of this stuff is going to go, some of this stuff is just going to get cut in the editing room. And that's a good lesson to have as you're going in to write the next thing, because you're already like, yeah, that's somewhere in the back of your mind. And, you know, hopefully you can use that to your advantage.
All right, one last question from me, because I do see that there's a whole lot of questions there. Yes, Ramesh? I see them piling up there.
Okay.
But so, because this isn't about me, this is about our members. So, but I just want to ask this sort of question about reality here, you know? So it's like, you write for a season, and you don't have to answer this question directly, but are you contracted for just one season, and then when that season's done, you have to kind of sit around and wait to see if your contract will be renewed, or are you already off scrambling to try to find another gig? How does that work? Because I think that a lot of our members just think, oh, you get a writing job and you're just on the writing job until the show's canceled, and that's kind of how it works. But that's not exactly how it works.
No, and there's always the other thing of like, you're on that writing job until the show gets canceled, or until you no longer have a, you know, place in that show, you know. But you know, I think that one of the, yeah, that's incredibly true, in that, you know, like I think many other kinds of jobs and careers, I feel like writing in television and features and whatever, or animation, is that you're working, and you're always trying to, you know, figure out what the next thing is going to be during that time. And so you might be juggling a bunch of other things kind of loosely in the background that you're developing, or, you know, whatever it is, trying to get yourself out there for another opportunity. You know, on American Rust, you know, I think my initial contract was for 3 seasons, but, you know, that's all dependent on whether the show gets renewed. They have an option to, you know, pick up my option and bring me back for a second season or a third season or what have you. Because we were in such a delay of that year from March of 2020 to March of 21, I, actually did get, hired to write on another series, as we were still far away from knowing whether we were going to go into production or when that would happen, when we would go into a second season writer's room. So I was able to, write on another series for Netflix, Florida Man, with Don Todd, showrunner, which was a great experience, and they're shooting now. So yeah, you're always kind of like trying to do some form of hustling and figuring out what the next thing is, and hoping that you can, count on, well, if this goes, then maybe we'll get a second season, and maybe I'll have done a good enough job to, sort of be brought back into that space and do it again. So fingers crossed, we'll see.
It's like my dad was a New York City fireman. He was a New York City fireman for 25 years, right? He knew that he had a job. Maybe they might move firehouses or something, but, he didn't have to sort of hustle every day to worry if he was going to be a fireman at the end of the season. So
Right.
is there stress involved with the idea of having to hustle, or are you sort of beyond that now?
No. Yes, there's stress involved. I don't think I'll ever be beyond that. I think the other thing is that, like, this is a flashback, but when I got hired on Chicago Fire, and of course my oft repeated joke or line is that, I was in Chicago Fire for a hot minute, and then I got Chicago fired. And and that had, that had all sorts of reasons behind it, not the least of which was I don't think I was necessarily I was in the right mindset, or I was the right person for that kind of a show. But it was a great opportunity, and I learned a lot from the process. And then, within, I think, 3 months of losing that job, which again was like, I thought, I'm in the firehouse for 25 years, I never have to move. And then all of a sudden it was gone, even though I was struggling in that process. I, was part of selling SEIS MANOS to Netflix. And so now I'm the co-creator of a project. I'm the executive producer of a project. And I thought, like, great, this is, now I'm in the firehouse for 25 years. And then that gets made and that comes out and, doesn't get renewed. And, or at least hasn't yet. And I don't anticipate that it will anytime soon, but, you never know. But yeah, so then it's like, you're constantly, developing, looking for things, trying to do the best job that you can possibly do with the job that you have, but also with an eye to, what's coming down the pipe, what's next. And so I think that kind of puts writers always in a sort of a sense of, anticipation, stress, anxiety, and there's something that's both exhilarating about that and also terrifying about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you just gotta, kind of create the conditions for good things to happen. And I think that's part of the process of, having multiple irons in the fire, or just like, looking at the possibilities of developing or writing new material, or getting something else off the ground. So there's a lot of that that's kind of, always sort of brewing in the background.
I know I said I was going to open up to questions, but I can't help it. How instrumental are your reps? Do you have both agent and manager?
At present, I have just managers.
Just managers. And how instrumental are they in getting you work?
Well, I mean, I have to, credit my managers almost entirely for American Rust, because they were, my manager, particularly Chris Mills. I'm at Authentic Talent.
Oh, you're at Authentic, yeah.
Yeah, so
Sure.
Chris Mills, Bob Sabani, and
yeah, I know Bob very well. He's a very dear friend of mine.
And Jenny Frisbee have been my managers since 2013, since my first job working on Dusk Till Dawn series. And so the script that I had written, my sample was kind of I don't know if niche is the right word, but it definitely had a certain place, and that place was American Rust. you know, my story in the script White Boy was in a large part set in West Virginia. And when I first met, you know, with the showrunners on Rust, they were like, "Tell us about growing up in West Virginia." I'm like, "I didn't grow up in West Virginia, you know. I'm a writer. I make things up and I do a little research, and you know, I kind of try to make it seem real, and I guess it worked." So, and so, you know, Chris got my script to Dan Futterman and Adam Rapp, and within a week, you know, I was getting an interview, and I think they had already, you know, interviewed a lot of different people. They were trying to find the right group of people for this room. You know, it was like 6 writers, so it's not a huge room, and so, you know, they were great about that, and I think my managers have been really great about, like, I think all good managers should do, is like, their job is to make introductions for you. Their job is to put you into rooms with people, and then you build those relationships on your own, you know, and they sort of help you, you know, cultivate that. But you know, I think in particular for American Rust, which led to me getting onto Florida Man, which led, you know, has led to other things too. They've been really great, and yeah, I'm really happy with those guys.
Awesome. Okay, Ramesh.
You said your room, you had 6 writers in your room. Was it a diverse group, even though the story is set in Pennsylvania, Western PA? And how important was that to have a diverse group of writers?
I think it was, you know, it's a very diverse group. You know, African American, Afro Latina, you know, LGBT, you know, Mexican American. So it was, you know, it was a pretty diverse group, and I think it was really important for the stories that we were telling, because you know, one of the other sort of side to American Rust is a character named Isaac and his sister Lee, and Isaac and Lee are both half Anglo, half Mexican. And so there's a whole kind of element that goes with that, and there's some LGBT elements that go with that. And Isaac is sort of on his own journey throughout the show that's very separate from the story that is the Jeff Daniels, Maura Tierney kind of story. So it's a really interesting blend of all of these things, which I think is what I think makes the show and the idea of the show so interesting to me.
In the gap year, you said you were about to start shooting in March 2020, and you didn't start shooting till March 21. Was there a lot of rewriting done in while you were waiting?
Yeah, I think there was some rewriting done. I wasn't really involved in that. I was, you know, off doing other things during that time. But yeah, there was definitely some rewriting being done, and I think just trying to restructure things a little bit. And of course, you know, kind of it gave extra time to deal with, you know, story things or notes from the studio, notes from the network, all that kind of stuff, and figure things out, even as we were getting closer to production and going into table reads and, you know, getting more notes and more feedback. So yeah, it was I think for the show itself, there was not a lot of downtime. You know, I think it may be some at the beginning of just realizing, like, okay, this is not going to happen, you know, when we think it's going to happen. So we've got to, you know, close up shop for a little while, but we're going to keep the lights on, so we can start looking to, you know, when we'll actually get to go and shoot this thing.
Speaking of getting notes, can you talk a little bit about getting notes, how you handle notes, whether it's notes from the producer, from the network, from your own, like the showrunner, how that all works, and, you know, sort of how different are they or how similar they are?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's like I said before, this is the most collaborative art form that there is. And so you're going to have collaborators that are, you know, studio or network or executives or whatever, you know, producers, that are going to come with ideas or say, like, I think there's a missed opportunity here to address something else that's, you know, that could be brought up here because it's not here already, or all those kinds of things. So, you know, at least I try to be as open as possible to like, well, what is it, what is the note? There are notes that I think, just like anything else, any form of critique or whatever, that are constructive, and then ones that aren't so constructive, and so you try to navigate that space and figure out, what is it that's actually being called for here? How can that be addressed? Is it a real thing? Is it just sort of a whim? And you kind of, find a way to deal with those things. And then some notes are just, just in terms of production and like the ease of production, scheduling, and it's like, is this an absolutely necessary thing because it's going to cost a whole day to do, or, and so it's there are things like that where, you say, well, it's essential to the story, or no, we can't lose these scenes because an actor might not be available for those scenes, in the time that's allotted to shoot them, because it's essential that that actor is in those scenes, that character is in those scenes. And if that character gets taken out of those scenes, the scenes don't have as much import or weight to them as they would have had that actor been available. So, you've got to figure these things out, and you've got to, make things work. And some of those, like I said, are constructive, some of them less so, but, you kind of do what you can do, and then try to hope that it makes, like I said, makes a better project, makes a better show.
Generally speaking, how much rewriting does a showrunner do? I have a friend who's a showrunner, and he literally rewrote every single episode that often left his writers dismayed, disheartened, and angry. Did you run SEIS MANOS?
Yes.
Were you the show? Okay, so you've been a showrunner and you've been on staff, so you know it both ways. How much rewriting does the showrunner do?
I mean, I think that's different in every situation and different for different writers. A showrunner might rewrite someone who's a lower level writer more than they would rewrite someone who's a higher level writer. I think the one thing that I really appreciate about working with people like Dan Futterman and Adam Rapp is that especially for both of them, that the written word is almost holy. It really is there's this kind of sacredness to the written word, whether that's words that they wrote or words that you wrote. It's like, once there's a contract that comes along in this whole situation, which is, I bring you into this project because I trust you enough to write the thing. I might make suggestions, I might rewrite some things or for clarity or whatever, but I don't want to lose, the thing that you brought to it. So, one of the things that happened in that year off is that as we were getting closer to production, I got asked to look at something in like one of the last couple episodes or something, and just like give my thoughts about it. And I said, well, can I get all the episodes? And I would like to read through them all the way through. And I was really sort of, very happy at, to see that not a lot of like things that I'd written had changed. There's this sense of like, even though it was months and months ago, and I have like only a vague recollection of the fugue that I was in when I wrote it, I recognize rhythms and patterns of speech and turns of phrase and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, this really kind of survived intact. And the things that weren't so intact are better. So there's that whole process. Other times, showrunners are very, what's the word? They just have a better way of, trying to streamline a series, all these episodes, so that there's a sort of uniformity in character voice and stuff like that. Because you can read something and say like, wow, this character sounds very different in episode 4 than they did in episode 2. And well, it's because it had a different writer or something like that, and the showrunner didn't really match that tone throughout. And so both things happen. On SEIS MANOS, I didn't really do. It's just 2 writers, me and my partner Daniel Dominguez on that project.
Wow.
And And so, we had we had 8 episodes, and each of us wrote 4 episodes, but we collaborated a lot on them. So we weren't rewriting each other or anything like that, but it was like, I contributed things to his episodes, he contributed things to mine, but it wasn't I didn't go back and say like, all right, I'm taking all the episodes now and I'm going to rewrite them. There was nothing like that. So like I said, collaborative. I think that's the at least that's my approach.
So we have some questions. Tiffany Fussell is from Florida, so she's very curious about your Florida Man project, because she says that I'm sure that every Florida writer has at least an idea for a project by that name. So she's just curious, how did it come about? What's the angle of the script?
Right. Well, that's another one where, this is a project that existed already, and I'm brought on as one of the writers in the room, producer level writer on that project as well. Don Todd, who has, worked in TV for a long time. I think this is his first original streaming series for Netflix. It's very much in the Elmore Leonard kind of vein, kind of the out of sight vibe to it, hopefully. And it's a crime story, but it's got some humor in it. It's not overtly comic, and it's not a comedy, but it's got some humor to it. But a lot of the DNA of that project comes from, things that Don has been interested in, I think, his whole life, and things that he's written about before. And also the influences from, like I said, Elmore Leonard to, movies like Night Moves with Gene Hackman and Melanie Griffith from the 70s, and sort of like neo-noir kind of stuff, but with that Leonard touch to them. But it's still something very much its own, and it's set mostly in Florida. It starts in Philly and goes to Florida, and is, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It was great fun to do that. That was a, writer's room that was completely online. It was completely virtual. So that was an interesting experience in itself, but it's well into production now. They started about a month ago, and they're shooting it now. So that's really exciting to see that come together.
Did you say who's starring in it?
Edgar Ramirez is
yes,
the
you did.
star
Okay,
of it. Yeah, and I think there's some, I don't know if any of the other cast has been announced yet, but there's some pretty cool people on the show, which I'm really excited about, seeing how those things, play out.
Awesome.
Can you talk a little bit about, you said the Florida Man was a Zoom writing room online. Can you talk a little bit about how that worked and how you collaborated?
Well, it's a really different experience. My first time doing an all virtual writer's room, so you don't have the luxury of having your tactile boards up around you and just the atmosphere being in the room, or the things that develop when you're going to go get a snack, with one of the other writers at the coffee machine and whatever. So, it's a very condensed, more, in a way, a lot more focused kind of experience. And so I found like we were kind of burning through a lot of story, and a lot of coming up with stuff and characters and story arcs and all that kind of stuff in the moment, in a way which didn't really, it just felt like a much more compressed and condensed kind of thing. And it was a good experience in and of itself, just a very different one from, the one that I have been used to before. But the one I think we all adapted to pretty well. We also had an online program, Writers Room Pro, which kind of has the virtual board and stuff like that, and index cards on there, and you can do all these reports and print all this stuff out, but easily map out episodes, character arcs, season arcs, all that stuff. So that was a really cool thing too.
Where do you think the future of the writing room will go post COVID? Do you think it'll be a hybrid?
You know,
How would you
I-
do it? You know,
how
if
would
it were
I do
your
it?
writing room?
If it were my writing room, I think I would try to do a hybrid. I think, you know, if it were happening tomorrow, we might have to go to virtual room just in terms of, you know, protocol and safety. I think, but that could change the day after tomorrow, and then people would feel like it was more of a feasible thing to do in-person stuff. I think if we do in-person stuff in any time in the near future, there's going to have a lot of protocol in terms of, you know, testing, masking, you know, all that kind of stuff. But there's something about that experience that, because people have not had it for a while, we really miss that experience of all being in the room together and building that camaraderie, you know, and having that water cooler time, and just being able to, you know, we're inventing, we're creating, and there's something that comes from that idea of sort of like, you know, kind of in the soup together, rather than sort of having this filter between us, that can, you know, I think is a good thing. So as long as it's safe, as long as it's practical, you know, I love the idea of being back in a real room.
Sure. So here's an interesting question from Rick. This is a complete detour. Any thoughts on some of our top cinematographers calling for shorter work days on set?
I guess I'm out of the loop because I have not heard this. It was not something that happened when we were on set. I mean, we had long days sometimes, and we had to have second units and splinter groups sometimes, you know, shooting alternates and shooting inserts and shooting, you know, other kinds of things. But I hadn't heard anything about shorter days on set for that. I don't know why it would necessarily be particular to DPs rather than, you know, any other crew members that wanted shorter days on set. You know, I felt like we worked with great cinematographers on American Rust, John Grillo and Laura, and they were, you know, really, really good. And so, you know, I think one of the things about being a DP is that it takes time. It takes time to set up these setups and these shots and all of the lighting and everything else. So I hadn't heard anything about it. So I feel like uninformed enough to make any kind of call on that one.
Yeah, I think maybe there's been just a little bit of buzz. There was, I don't remember who it was, where it was, when it was, but there was I believe it was like an assistant camera person who spent a very long day on the set and then was killed driving home when he fell asleep behind the wheel of his car. I don't remember when that happened, but I do recall that sparked a little bit of controversy, and that might be maybe where the genesis of this question is coming from.
Right.
And
well, I was just gonna say on Rust, we did have like protocol where if we were shooting on location that was a certain distance away from home base, then that we were put up in hotels in that location, so that we wouldn't have to drive all the way back to Pittsburgh at 3 a.m. if we were shooting at night or whatever, you know. And there were some situations like that, you know, but for the most part, when we were a certain distance away from home base, we were given accommodations in a nearby hotel, which was great.
Yeah, you know, there are some actors, I think like John Travolta is one who just like, he demands, you know, it's like an 8-hour workday and that's it. And, you know, like we're only shooting for 8 hours because people need to be home with their children and they need to have a life. And maybe that's kind of where this question is trying to hint at, because there is something about production that can be pretty grueling. You know,
Absolutely.
Those days can go 15, 16, 18-hour days, well into the nights. It's just, it's tough. It's not glamorous by any means. You know, shooting a film, there is nothing glamorous about shooting a film. Nothing.
The only thing that's glamorous about it, I don't know if glamorous is the right word, but it's certainly rewarding when you just like, you sit back and it might have been 12, 13 hours into the thing, and then you find that you're sitting there at a table rehearsing a scene with Jeff Daniels and Maura Tierney, and you're just like, how did this happen? These people are great, and I'm working with incredible writers and incredible cast and crew, and it's like, this is pretty good.
So you're coming at it from the other way, which is that, yeah, it's like I could be pouring hot tar on a roof, like in Austin for 10 hours a day. And
I could be,
yeah.
yeah, but it's still, there's something that's crazy about this, that we get to make these things, we get to make TV, and we get to make movies, and we get to make animation.
And of course, you're such a film fan.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yes,
I mean, like, yeah, you're a film fanatic. You would, like, even if you weren't doing this, even if you were pouring hot tar on a roof, you would have called me and said, let's go see Forbidden Games.
That's right.
That's a great movie. I love that film. It's such a good film.
Go ahead, Ramesh. The floor is yours.
Someone here wanted to know, well, for the lack of a better phrase, your origin story. What was the beginning of your creative process starting out? How did you first realize you were a creative person, and how did that then develop? What was your inspiration? Who inspired you? Books, films, whatever.
I know who asked that question. I don't even to read it. I don't even need to read it. I know who asked that question.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's Maria.
I knew it. Hey, Maria. All right, the floor is yours.
Hey, Maria. Well, I grew up in South Texas. I grew up, kind of being in love with reading, in love with books and movies and all of that kind of stuff, music from a really early age. And, was the kind of a kid who, I just sought these things out. I sought going out to the movies. I sought going, to find novelizations of movies that I was reading when I was a kid and stuff like that. And so, it was something where, at least in my own mind, there was kind of a disconnect between this is something that I could do and this is something that I love. And I think there was always a sense in my mind of like, this is something I could do in terms of writing, but I never necessarily thought, oh, I could be a screenwriter, or I could be a television writer, or I could, write for the movies or anything like that. I was always interested in writing. I was a Stephen King kid. I grew up, discovering a lot of stuff through, like a lot of kids do, I guess, or did, through horror and sort of the forbidden and stuff like that. So, Edgar Allan Poe, Arthur Conan Doyle, Stephen King, these were a lot of my touchstones as a young person. When I was about 10 years old was the first time I really remember spending any time with my cousin Robert at my grandmother's house in South Texas.
That's Robert Rodriguez, for those who...
Robert Rodriguez, who you might know from such small movies as Spy Kids and Alita Battle Angel and such. And so, I was about 10 years old. I think Robert is 2 or 3 years older than I am. And we were sitting in the back of my grandfather's truck at my grandmother's house, or my uncle's truck. And, he was talking to me very excitedly and animatedly about some new movie that had just come out, that he was telling me how the director did this and how the director did that. A movie he had not seen yet, but had read all about in like Fangoria or something. And the movie was Escape from New York by John Carpenter. Oh. And I just remember just like, having to pick my jaw up off the floor of the bed of the truck and thinking like, who is this guy? How does this person exist? And how is he my cousin? And how is he part of my family? And how have I not met him before? Because he already seems to have such a laser focus on, I'm going to be a filmmaker. I'm going to be a storyteller cinematically and all this stuff. And so not long after that, I went to a Catholic boys boarding school in San Antonio called St. Anthony's. Robert lived in San Antonio. His family lived in San Antonio. And so he happened to live across the street from that school. So he was a day student and just went there during the day. I lived at the school because I was, from a town about 4 hours south of there. But, at that time, Robert was already starting to make his first home movies, his first movies with his siblings and stuff, and with his other students. One of whom was Carlos Gallardo, who he ended up going to make El Mariachi with. They were making movies when we were in high school together. He did like this, I think 20-minute Indiana Jones kind of thing called Ismail Jones and the, I can't remember now what it was called, with Carlos, that he shot in and around campus, and then I think even in Mexico. But so I was like, this guy is, he was in a lot of ways my film school. We ended up both at the University of Texas at Austin together. He was, trying to get into the film production classes. He was going to these film history classes, and I would accompany him often to screenings at Jester Auditorium. I was an English major, so anyhow, the long story short was that when he made El Mariachi after graduating from college, he said, I need some music for the movie. I want some like little Mexican guitar pieces. So I was, a fledgling musician, I guess. And so I wrote a couple of things and they made it into the movie, and then the movie went to Sundance and won the audience award and all this stuff. And people were starting to knock on his door, and he's like, we need to start writing something together. So we started writing a script together in 1993, 1994. That was the first thing where I was like, really started to look at this idea of like being a screenwriter. And then ended up working with him for a long time, coming all the way up through Spy Kids and Planet Terror and Shorts and Machete, and then wanting to use that to kind of like build my own career, become my own self. And so that was a kind of an invaluable experience of, working with someone who was a very different writer than I was. And Robert thinks visually. He's always done from early childhood. He was an artist. He had a cartoon, a comic strip in the student paper at the university and all this stuff. So he was a very visual writer. I was kind of more a verbal writer, or the dialogue of things or rhythms of things, and so it was kind of a good blend. And so that was sort of like the origin for me. It was like, here's this door that's opening, and I want to get into it, because he's someone who I think it was very evident very early on that he was going to be a filmmaker, and I was really excited to kind of wanting to be a part of that, because I didn't really have contacts with anyone else that had that drive in the same way.
Can you talk a little bit about Machete, sort of how that came about, concept, what the writing process was like? That's a fun movie, it's really a fun movie.
Yeah. Machete came about from the very first, Robert met Danny Trejo on the set of when they were casting for Desperado. So it's basically his like second, third movie, Robert's movie. And, he's auditioning for this hitman character called Navajas, which means knives. And so, in walks Danny Trejo, and Robert's like, you're the guy. Here are these knives, start practicing with them, throwing them, whatever. And, they became pretty fast friends. And Robert, said to him, it would be really great one day to have a movie where you're not the bad guy, you're the hero. And so, I think at that point, the concept of Machete was born. And, that was, again, like early 90s. And so it didn't really come to fruition for such a long time. When the Planet Terror, well, I think by that point, Robert already used the Machete character in Spy Kids, a different version of it, but Danny's in Spy Kids playing Uncle Machete, who is sort of like the Q to the Spy Kids, and Q by James Bond Q, I don't mean the recent Q. And so when Planet Terror came around and the Grindhouse idea came around, there was a lot of excitement about this double feature. Robert did Planet Terror and Quentin Tarantino did Death Proof, and it was released as a double feature the way it would be at the Grindhouse and in Times Square or whatever in the 70s, or drive-in. And they made a fake trailer for Machete, thinking like, wait, great, we'll make the fake trailer, now we'll never have to make the movie. but there was so much excitement before Grindhouse came out that like, oh, this could be one of many Grindhouse double features. We'll do, Werewolf Women of the SS with Machete, or Thanksgiving and Don't. These were all fake trailers that were made for the movie by, filmmakers like Rob Zombie, Edgar Wright, and Eli Roth. And so, at that point, it was like, wow, this is going to be great. And I started working on script ideas for, what the Machete movie would be. I was actually on set when they were shooting some of the fake trailer, and I wrote some of the lines that are in the fake trailer for Cheech. And so then Grindhouse came out, didn't do so great. And it was like, oh, so much for the idea of doing more of these Grindhouse-y double features. But then the trailer kind of took on a life of its own on YouTube and different things, and people were commenting. It got a lot of hits, and people were saying like, "Oh, I want to see that movie." So it kind of restarted up a little bit again, start writing some stuff and developing some stuff, and we'll just do it as a low budget, straight to video kind of thing. But then it started to get bigger and bigger, and Robert was like, "I think we're going to get." Lindsay Lohan for this movie. I'm like, wait, what? And I think Don Johnson. We could get Don Johnson to play a character, and I was like, this is crazy. And then it was like Robert De Niro wants to be in the movie. I was like, what? Yeah, he wants to play the senator, and I'm like, that's not even a part. It's just a guy that gets shot. He's not a character in the movie, at least that we'd conceived of at that point. And it's like, no, I know, but he wants to play that. He wants to be in the movie. He wants to play that character. So we got to make it a real character. We got to, he doesn't want to do it unless there's something really there, but he wants to be in the movie. So that led to a whole bunch of development of coming up with ideas for this character and sending them to Robert De Niro and getting messages back like, that's good. Keep it coming. And
Well, that's interesting to think that, a screenplay could be developed that way. So, yeah.
I mean, this was a very Frankenstein kind of screenplay. But it was, it was great fun to see it actually happen. And, it really did kind of create a new character, and that hadn't really existed in the world before, which I think is pretty fun.
I think Danny Trejo's autobiography is out right now.
Yes, it is. Trejo.
Yes.
Have you had his tacos?
I have had his tacos.
Yeah.
And
they're
his
good,
donuts.
Yeah, I have not had his donuts yet. Now, but I'll confess that every time I go to get one of his tacos, I always end up getting a sandwich at Top Round next door, which is very good. I have had his tacos, but every time I go out there, I'm like, something? I think I'd rather have a roast beef sandwich. I don't know. So
that's okay too.
But something? That place is always packed. Like Danny's, it's always packed.
They are, and he keeps opening new ones. He opened one, I think, in the terminal at the LAX. He just opened one where was it? Pasadena? I don't remember now. But then the donut, Trejo's Coffee and Donuts, they did a special donut for SEIS MANOS because Danny is the voice of the bad guy in that show, and they did a special Danny donut for the show. So yeah, Danny's an incredible person.
He has truly an amazing story. He really does. It is such an amazing story.
The book is out right now. I think Donald Logue wrote on it, co-wrote it.
Yeah, right.
The actor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
They've been friends for some time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
He's a good guy too.
That's interesting. Can I just ask one?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So,
no worries.
As a Mexican American, how important is it for you to be involved with, write, or just explore Latin characters, Latin themes, Latin motifs?
I think it's really important. I mean, the thing is that I don't feel confined is not the right word, but I guess I feel like if I'm telling a story that involves a character that's from that background, then I'm going to do everything to do that in the right way. You know, SEIS MANOS was a very much in, you know, it's a we called it a Mexicanime. You know, it's an adult animated series set in Mexico in the 70s with a lot of, you know, different tropes in it and a lot of interesting things. And it was really important to me that it, you know, it have a certain authenticity to it. And writing on American Rust too, there's that element of having these sort of Mexican American characters in the show. So it's important, you know. I think that there's tendency to kind of like lump all Latin characters into one big group, and oftentimes that's just sort of generic Mexican or generic Mexican American. But there's, you know, all these other groups that, you know, if you're not specific enough, you would kind of do a disservice to things. But you know, at the same time, I don't necessarily feel an obligation to, you know, to write in a character if one isn't in the story or whatever, or something like that. I think the story kind of, you know, has to serve its first purpose, which is to, you know, to be a story itself. And if that's something where, you know, that there's a place, or that sounds wrong in the way I'm saying it, but it's like it's got to be organic to the thing. And then once it is, then I want to be as authentic as possible in it.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, Ramesh. I cut you off with that question.
No, not at all. I was just, someone here asked, she said, I think it was Rick. He said, I'm sure we all have days where the last thing we feel like doing is writing. Do you have a process or any tips to kick yourself into gear on days like that?
Yes. You know, one of the things that I have found the most helpful is to carry some sort of a notebook with me at all times. I say that and I can't produce a notebook out of my back pocket to show you right now. But, you know, especially like when I was on set in Pittsburgh, I had this, like the steno pad with my laptop, you know, I carried it with me everywhere. And so in a way, just, you know, if you're struggling, if you're having trouble writing or you don't feel like writing, then pick up a pen and a piece of paper and write, I'm struggling, I don't feel like writing, I hate this, you know, whatever, just keep going. And you'll activate whatever, you know, muscle memory and things that will get you into something. Because, you know, you're going from, you know, it's like whenever I foolishly sign up with a physical trainer, I always say, look, we're going from nothing to something. So don't have high expectations. And so the whole idea is just to activate yourself, you know, to do it in whatever way is possible. And if you don't feel like doing it, then write down, I don't feel like doing this. I can't believe I don't have any ideas. I can't believe I'm so stuck in this place or whatever. And then and the more that you do that, you'll find something, you know, you'll get to something. And so that's the way it's always worked for me. And that was the you know, the plus of having that notebook with me at all times is that it became notes, it became, you know, to-do list, it became diary, journal, whatever. It also became, you know, snippets of dialogue or scene ideas or whatever stuff that I was working on. And it was always, you know, right there within arm's reach to do that. So, you know, sometimes it's, you know, getting a change of scenery, whether it's just, you know, getting out of a space where you're not comfortable or you don't feel like writing and going outside and trying it there, you know, going to whatever place you can go to separate from, you know, the place where you're stuck can sometimes unstick you.
I'm not sure from your resume if you've directed anything. Is that part of your plan? Is that part of your grand master plan? Do you want to direct like your cousin?
I wish I could direct like my cousin. That would be great. You know, and I always talk about like the first time being on the set with Dusk Till Dawn and working with the director Dwight Little, who I then did Last Rampage with. You know, Dwight is an incredible director. He's been making films for a long time and did a lot of, you know, big action movies and a lot of television, you know, and he was so open and collaborative in the process of working on the show together. And it was so great to work on this indie movie we did together with Robert Patrick and Heather Graham and Bruce Davison and John Hurd and Alex McNichol and people like that were just really great. That it was like, I want to do this at some point. I actually wrote a while back. I wrote a short to try to direct myself, and you know, I didn't pursue it. I have not pursued it yet, but I think that I don't know. I would like to say yes. I would like to do this at some point. I think I just need to set my mind to it and work up whatever I need to do to do that. It's, to me, it's a completely different animal. It's a completely different animal, and you have to be completely aware of so much when you're doing that. You can't just hide back in the shadows as the writer. You know, you've got to be much more present, and it's always an eye-opening experience just to be on set and work with a couple of different directors and see different styles and how they do things and how they get the thing that needs to be done, you know, when you're doing it over and over and over again. So yeah, I think there's a possibility there.
And it's like, I think it's perfectly fine that there are writers who just want to write. But I asked that question to you only because you are such a film fan, and it would just feel like it would be sort of a natural evolution for a writer like you. But I'm not pushing you into the field.
Well, I mean, I used to always have this mindset for such a long time, you know, when people would ask me that question, you know, years ago, do you want to direct? And I would always say, I just want to be a better writer. I just want to be a better writer. But over the years, I guess, from time to time, it's certainly been something that's alluring and sort of, you know, right around the corner, it seems like. So, you know, I was working on a feature concept, and one of my managers said, like, you're directing this? And I said, well, I don't know. It's like, no, you're directing this. Until someone tells you you're not, you're directing this. I'm like, okay. So, you know, I think that those possibilities exist, and I think I would love to try that.
Great.
Can you talk a little bit about Last Rampage? I really like that film. How did that come about, and how did, you know, what was the evolution of that film?
Well, Last Rampage is a true story about Gary Tyson, who was, you know, convicted murderer, convicted criminal, spent a lot of his life in prison, and but managed when he was not in prison to, you know, to be a husband and a father to 3 boys. And when these boys were teenagers, I think the oldest one might have been 20 at the time, in 1978, I believe, in Arizona, they busted him out of prison. And so that's what the story is about, this sort of this escape from prison and what happened in the days following that escape. And this was a project that that Dwight Little had for a long time. Had actually been brought to his stepson Jason Richter, who a lot of people knew as the star of Free Willy, and when Jason was a teenager, to star in, you know, to develop it for him to play one of the teenage sons of Gary Tyson, and you know, Jason is in his 30s now, so we developed the project. Jason did star in the movie as one of the policemen, as one of the deputies who's going after the Tyson gang. But that's how long it had sort of been, you know, in the family, I guess. And when we were doing Dusk Till Dawn, you know, like I said, I had such a great experience with Dwight. You know, he told me about the thing, and he said, you know, would you be interested? Will you read this script? He had a script already. And he said, will you read this script and tell me what you think? And I did, and I had a lot of thoughts about it. And he said, well, what do you think about, you know, tackling it and rewriting it? And I said, well, okay, you know, started to work on it, started to dig into it a little bit. And then I just, you know, I would get to a certain point and kind of feel like I was stuck. I hadn't figured it out yet. And it really wasn't until, you know, like I would always tell the story as, you know, this is a true story about a guy who escaped from prison in '78 with the help of his 3 teenage sons. But that really wasn't the story. The story was about how, you know, these 3 teen boys, you know, helped their father escape. And in the process, you know, the oldest son realizes that dad is nuts and he's got to do whatever he can to keep his younger brothers safe and try to get them out of this situation. And that to me was like, okay, now I can kind of see a way through this thing. And that was the process. And then, you know, Dwight got some producers involved and, you know, put together the money and started casting. And, you know, Heather Graham came on really, you know, quickly. Robert Patrick was involved, you know, from the beginning. We had worked with him on Dusk Till Dawn, and he's an incredible actor. And this was a really great part for him. And Chris Browning is another actor who was fantastic in the movie. So it was a really fun experience to go and, you know, make a movie you know, like 18 days or whatever it was, and on a low budget, but, you know, with making it authentic to the period, and, you know, it's a road movie, a lot of things that we managed to do with not a whole lot of money, and just a really dedicated cast and crew. So it was a great experience.
Working with writers like Dwight, and even on American Rust, you worked with people like John Dow, right?
Right.
And even your cousin Robert. Has it helped you with your writing become a better writer? Has it?
Yeah, I mean, the freshest experience has been with John Dahl. And the crazy thing is that, God, about 7 or 8 years ago, I had written with a friend of mine a kind of neo-noir script called Burned. It was set in Texas in the 60s. And that script got sent out to Brian Koppelman and David Levine, and guys that do Billions now and have done Rounders, you know, with John Dahl. And I knew Brian and David a little bit, and they were like, oh, you know, they read the script, they loved it. And they're like, you got to get this to John and get this to John Dahl. And so I had actually met with Dahl 7, 8 years ago about that project. And so now that, you know, we didn't get to make the film back then, but now, you know, working with him on American Rust, you know, John is an incredible, he's a force of nature. He's so good at what he does. And, you know, he's been making movies for a long, long time. He's also really visual sense.
Is he the Red Rock West director? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, Red Rock West.
Okay.
Last Seduction.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Kill Me Again.
Kill Me Again. A lot of movies, and then he's done TV for, you know, almost 10 years. I'm thinking at least. You know, he directed a lot of The Americans and you know, Billions. A bunch of stuff. Breaking Bad. What was the other one? I can't remember right now, but a huge amount of things. And so working with someone like that and just getting to sit alongside and also talk through problems on the set, problems in the script, problems in the story, or whatever, and you know, find practical solutions to things was huge learning experience. And just like, you know, never. And was so inviting and bringing, you know, and like, you know, being very collaborative and very, you know, he's just a dream to work with. And so, you know, working with someone like that, it can't but help but influence, you know, the way I think about things and the way I try to, you know, write things. You know, you see things from a director's point of view, you know, which is like, we've got to do this scene. How can we do it in the time we have allotted? You know, how can we do this in the best way? Setting up, you know, action sequences to, you know, intense, you know, very insular kind of dramatic two character scenes, you know, two characters sitting next to each other and having an emotional rawness, you know, to them, that can be just as powerful as a, you know, an action sequence or, you know, a fight or whatever, you know, the kinds of things. And so, yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. I also worked with the director Darnell Martin, who's fantastic, and you know, very different kind of approach from John, but so gifted and so just had this intuitive sense about things that was really, really interesting to watch her work, especially with some of the younger actors and getting them into their characters and getting them into the headspace of what a scene could be and all of that kind of stuff. And so, you know, all of this can't help but sort of bleed into hopefully the things that I'll write going forward. You know, it's just like, you know, seeing things from a different perspective, you know, and it's really rewarding to be able to work with people of that caliber.
You're very busy. I mean, your resume, it's very busy. Do you still write specs? Do you write feature specs, pilot specs? Do you still?
I'm trying. I'm trying to. I mean, I think, you know, this question that's showing up on the screen right now about the dream project I've been working on for a while, but haven't gotten off ground just yet. Yes, there's one I think that definitely qualifies for that, and it was something that really kind of picked up a lot of steam while I was in Pittsburgh. I did some research while I was there, and for this one project that, you know, I think I for a long time was almost afraid to write, and the time in Pittsburgh kind of, you know, alleviated a lot of that fear. And so I'm trying to continue the momentum that I had when I was in Pittsburgh to get this thing written. And it's something I'm really excited about, but it's also a period drama set in the 60s in Ohio. And I think it's once I write it, it'll be the best thing I've written. So I'm getting there, but I'm almost there.
That's great.
Do you have a writing routine when you're not on a show or something like that? Like daily, do you have a routine if you're not on anything? Or
you know, one of the things is that I have been so bad about structuring my own self when I'm not in the writer's room or I'm not in a job or whatever like that. Once that structure exists for me, like being on set, I know I'm going to be on set for 12, 13, 14 hours. Then I have a sense of structure and I can multitask a little bit better. I can do things. I'm almost like, when it becomes more amorphous, it becomes harder to do. So writing routine, I don't know that I necessarily could stretch the definition of routine enough to say I have a writing routine, you know. But I try to, you know, at least part of my process has been that having the notebook and you know, giving myself the time to, you know, kind of brainstorm and write things out and all of that stuff, but then also to do a lot of, you know, the due diligence of researching a thing. And but to me, I think the hardest part is because I've been in, I don't want to call it fight or flight mode, but in that sort of anxious space between jobs where you're just like, I end up taking on a lot of things and then having a hard time trying to create a hierarchy of needs and, you know, sort of prioritize the things that need to be done today and the things that can wait until tomorrow. And so sometimes it's kind of like wherever my attention span takes me to, because there's a lot of things and I think they're all interesting, but, you know, it's like diving into like that dream project is the thing that I sort of should be doing right now. And but at the same time, I'm juggling a couple of other projects, some that are longstanding, some that are fresher, you know, and trying to, you just always want to have whatever you have, get it to whatever the next step is, so you can set it aside and let it go do that thing while you work on something else.
do you outline? Do you index card? Do you have a process when you sit down to write your stories?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely this pilot that I'm writing, I wrote an outline while I was in Pittsburgh. I was hoping to try to get, half of it written before I left. That was a very ambitious goal that I didn't meet, but I wrote an outline, and I wrote a lot of pieces of scenes. So I feel like I have a good starting point to keep going. It's like I know the show, I know the pilot, I know I can write this thing. I just got to, put all the pieces together and keep fleshing things out a little bit more.
Are there any resources, books, anything online that you might recommend to our members? Anything maybe that you've gravitated toward, things that maybe you read when you were first starting out that motivated you, taught you?
I always think about this, Robert was living in Mandeville Canyon back in the 90s, like 96. And he was commissioned to write a screenplay for a Predator movie, which at the time was called Predators. Eventually, this movie got made about 10 years after the fact, with the director Nimrod Antal, and Robert was a producer on it. But I worked on that script back in the day, and when I was living there with Robert in the 90s, like, maybe we should read some screenplay books. I was like, okay. So we went down, I want to say we went to the Virgin Megastore, but I think we went to Book Soup. We went to Book Soup, and we bought, like, I don't know, half dozen or so screenwriting books. And Robert's like, all right, you read these and I'll read these, and then you tell me what you learned out of those, and I'll tell you what I learned out of these. I'm like, okay. And so I read at the time, I think it was Making a Good Script Great, The Writer's Journey by Chris Vogler, and Lou Hunter's 434 screenwriting book.
All
And
classics.
maybe a couple others are How to Write a Script in 21 Days. Mm-hmm. And so, and I don't remember which ones Robert read. I think Robert may have read Sid Field and maybe some like Robert McKee. I don't remember which one. Anyway, the one that really, really resonated with me the most in that whole process was Chris Vogler's book, probably because I'm like, I love Joseph Campbell stuff and mythology and the whole hero's journey stuff. And here, was someone who had basically, created that for screenwriting, or developed this idea for screenwriting. And the first edition of that book, was, I just thought, like, all the lights were going off in my head. And so, and I think there's the 25th anniversary edition of the book out. And so that one is really interesting if you're into that whole sort of, like, the stories are stories, and we keep kind of going through the same kinds of patterns, and that you can learn something from mythology. You can learn something from the culture, different culture stories, and then, of course, like Save the Cat also was kind of a big thing for me when I first read it, and I wrote a letter to Blake, and I said, I would love it if you ever came to Texas. I would love to take your workshop. This is also, I guess, back in the early aughts, and he did. And I did his workshop in Austin, and then came to LA to do a second workshop, and really kind of hit it off with him. And then for a while, I was, after he passed, I was doing work with Save the Cat, and I taught the workshop in Austin and San Antonio, I think, and Scottsdale and different places. So those things, I think were always really good. Apart from that, about story ideas and things like that, that are really inspiring to a writer, it's like, I still from time to time, kind of pull out the old, the DSM, just a psychological handbook, mm-hmm. and look through things there and get ideas about, story ideas or character traits and different things. DSM-4, I don't know what it's up to now, but at the time it was like the DSM-3 and DSM-4 that I had, and there's something about just like going through that kind of reference material that can give you insights into things that I think is really useful.
Indeed. Somebody's asking this. Who's the person you've met in your career, the industry, who ignites your excitement for writing projects the most?
Wow.
Put you on the spot.
Ooh. Yeah, I know. I have to think. Is there? I mean, there's so many things where you feel like, wow. Trying to think of like a good example of them. I mean, I've had experiences, and this is not necessarily a direct answer to that question, but I've had experiences where you're just on, might be on the set of something, and you're working with an actor, and then you just realize it's like, oh, that's who you are. Not, and I don't mean that like, oh, you were the star of this movie, that came out 2 years ago. I mean, like, you're the guy who's thinking about things in this way. You're going to be the guy who's going to be the star of the movie 2 years from now. You know what I mean? And so there's something that's really exciting about that sense of discovery and having those experiences on set where, it's, someone that maybe other people would consider like, oh, that's a minor character, or that's a secondary character, and, it's not the top of the list or whatever. But you have that experience where you're like, I'd really love to write something with you, for you, with you in mind or whatever, kind of thing like that really excites me. Trying to think of like, there's just, I guess there are a lot of different people that have sort of filled that role for me in the past, where it's just like, wow, I want to.
It's kind of like asking somebody who their favorite child is, I think,
Yeah.
sometimes, because I think artists can be inspired by so many different people in so many different ways at so many different periods in their life. So, we are the sum total of everybody who's ever influenced us. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. But there's something about that, when you have that experience, or you have that pop, that epiphany, and you're like, wow, I need to, I want to do this with this person. I want to write this for this person. I want to create this, with this person in mind or whatever. That's really powerful. And because then you can really start seeing things that you didn't see before, because you have a certain idea that's been made flesh.
All right, Mr. Ramesh, I think because look, it is a holiday weekend. It's Saturday.
I know. And it's actually, believe it or not, Alvaro, it's actually sunny here today. I know, the 2 months you were here, it was touch and go there, but
it was. But it was great in Pittsburgh. I had a great time there.
It hasn't rained today.
And it's not raining here, and maybe Alvaro's got a barbecue to go to. So, do you have one last question?
Do you read scripts because of what you do, working on shows and all that? Do you have sort of found yourself having to read scripts by other writers? And if so, like, what do you look for in a writer? And then what are some of the issues that you come across when you get stuff from other writers?
That's a good question. I haven't necessarily had to read anything because I'm like in the position where I'm hiring other writers. I've worked but I've volunteered as like a mentor with like this program called the Disruptors, where I was working with, undocumented writers, for example, or I'm also a judge again this year for some of the screenplay competition at Austin Film Festival. Actually, I think one of the film competitions as well. So, there's just something about, I am reading stuff and I'm responding to stuff, and you can tell. It's like there are times when you can tell when a writer is ready or like beyond ready, and then there are other times when you can see that they still have a way to go. and it's a hard thing, I guess, to quantify. I'm not much about, you know, like the form and, you know, are there typos or anything like that. It's much more about, you know, about the material itself, about the characters. Are they telling the story in a compelling way? Are they you know, are they, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, are they good? Are they good at this? You know, and what can I do to help to make them better, or to, you know, give them some insight that they might not have thought of. And that's something I guess I have done from time to time, in terms of like working as you know, I was a part of Outfest Screenwriters Lab, and you know, gave feedback and notes and stuff with writers in that program. And so you know, I think you really try to encourage writers to, you know, to find their own voice, you know, to have an authenticity in the stories that they're telling and the ways that they're telling them, the way through, you know, a character can introduce us to the world of the story, and you know, the complexities that can come from different points of view being really conveyed in the story, so you really see that world through different points of view. I don't know, it's a holistic thing. It's kind of a, you know, I know it when I see it kind of thing. It's almost hard to quantify and put into words, but yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily, you know, read, again, like I haven't read for hiring purposes, at least not in a long time. Hopefully at one point I'll get to do that more. But also to recommend writers, you know, for different projects. You know, that's a question I often get. You know, people are looking for writers with certain backgrounds and certain skill sets, and so it's good to, you know, I've read different people in my, you know, in circles, my friends groups and stuff like that, to be able to say, oh, you know, you need to talk to this person, you know, you need to meet with this writer who I know from, you know, from this group or whatever, that I worked with, you know, through Outfest or Disruptors or something like that, so that you know, can help facilitate that kind of thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Alvaro, for your time today.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate your wisdom. It's been fun sort of watching your journey since I've met you, and we, of course, here are going to continue to keep an eye on everything that you're doing. We're certainly looking forward to American Rust. On, we said the 12th. Did we say the 12th?
Next Sunday week, as they say.
Next Sunday. Yeah. All right.
I'm actually heading out to New York next week for a premiere. We're going to do a premiere of the show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York next week, midweek, and then the show will be out on Sunday. So I'm really excited about that.
That'll be fun. Yeah.
Let's go see some movies. Let's go to the classic movie. Go see a classic movie.
Let's go. You give my love to Michael, of course, right? And,
yes.
And we will. Yeah, we have to, because otherwise, you know, all my kid is doing is, you know, he's watching like Family Guy, and you know, we need to.
You know, the picture that's coming up to this, I haven't been yet to the Los Feliz 3 now that it's part of the American Cinematheque.
Yeah.
But the picture that's coming up that I want to see there is coming up at the end of the month. I might be playing at the Arrow too, but the Los Feliz is much closer to me. But Emperor of the North. Have you ever seen this?
Oh, movie? Yes. Oh, Ernest Borgnine?
Yeah, Ernest Borgnine, Lee Marvin.
It's on a train. Yes, it's on a train.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it.
It's a terrific film. Oh.
Yeah. He's supposed to be like a real dick in it, right? Ernest Borgnine, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. I love me some Ernest Borgnine, you know.
I love me some Ernest Borgnine too. So I'm gonna go see that.
That sounds great.
It's on a Sunday night.
So.
All right.
That sounds cool. All right. Everybody, let's give a round of applause for our friend, our fellow Inside Pitch member, Alvaro Rodriguez. We're all going to watch American Rust, and Good luck with Florida Man. Everybody's saying good luck. We love you. Thank
Awesome.
you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, guys. Everything's great. All right, man. Everybody have a great, safe, wonderful, happy Labor Day weekend. And happy Rosh Hashanah. Do you say happy Rosh Hashanah? I'm such a goy because that's coming up next week.
Right.
But so enjoy, everybody. Again, thanks so much for being here today, Alvaro.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for the
much.
opportunity. I had a
Thank
great time
you.
chatting with you guys.
Right.
All right. Take care.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.